Good morning, happy holidays, and welcome to the Deeper GraphQL Security Testing webinar with StackHawk. We're super stoked, honestly, that you joined us this morning. It's crazy week. I know a lot of people have a lot of stuff going on, or you're just already checked out for the holidays. So we're really happy that you decided to join us this morning before you take off for your extended weekend, hopefully. So my name's Nicole Jones. I'm a product marketing manager here at StackHawk, but more importantly, the stars of the show are Lauren Nagel, our VP of product, and Austin Peregrine, a software engineer at StackHawk. This is the dream team who led the Deeper GraphQL security testing functionality. So in a minute or two here, you will have them at your disposal, and they're going to give you a deep dive on all the great things that you can do with this new functionality and how it will help your business. So, like I said, we know it's before the holidays. We're going to try to keep this one short and sweet and dive into the good stuff quickly. So we've got a pretty modest agenda for you. We're going to start off with talking about the kind of landscape of application security today, what's wrong with it, and what is dynamic application security testing and why it's important for those of you who are new here or new to StackHawk. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of API security testing, why it's hard, why organizations and even security tools have struggled with this over time, and then the solution that we've come up for this, which is testing with custom test data. And we will show you how that's put into action in a demo so you can get an idea of what that would look like at your organization and your team. And then we will go through a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to hand things over to Lauren and Austin to take the wheel, and we'll get started.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. And yes, just double thank you, everybody. I hope everybody's staying warm. I know there are crazy storms and cold fronts and all sorts of things. I'm actually in quasi-warm California and flying in right after this to the polar vortex, bomb cyclone, snowstorm, or something like that. So excited to be here with you all this morning before that adventure. We're going to start out with just some facts. So AppSec teams are really outnumbered these days. So this was in Forbes magazine as well as in the keynote at RSA this year, that the ratio of AppSec to engineer team size is about 1 to 100. And our CISO actually thinks that's low. But if you look at this AppSec team like Santa with kind of his one reindeer versus Santa with all his reindeer flying through the sky, what we really want to enable you to do with StackHawk is to empower your engineers to actually test for their own security vulnerabilities. And that allows you as the AppSec team to scale and cover all that code that development team is putting out. Because otherwise there's no way for you by yourself to cover what 100 developers are deploying on a daily basis. When we look at that relative cost to fix bugs, I always think back to when I started my career. I was an SDET, and so I was a QA engineer, and we always learned that the earlier we found the bugs, the cheaper and easier it was to fix. So if I could find a bug in a spec, or I could find a bug, when code was just being tested, then it was a lot easier to get that fixed, even if we found it in end-to-end testing or system acceptance testing. Once we'd shipped that issue, it becomes really hard to fix, especially in the pre-SaaS days when you had to re-release a CD or something. I'm dating myself, but even now with SaaS software, it's still a big effort. And once you find a security bug, especially, that becomes a real high priority issue. So then it becomes very disruptive to throw a bunch of security bugs back over the wall to engineering, who's moved on from this code to, whoa, the slides are flipping everywhere. So security will move on from this code. Sorry, we'll get that
Sorry.
slide back up. No worries.
Hang on.
Um, and for development teams and for me as like a product manager, that's really frustrating because we have a plan, we have a roadmap, we've got customer features we're trying to build or things that we owe to the business. And now all of that has to go on hold. We have to get a developer who maybe wrote that code a few months ago, or maybe a net new developer who hasn't worked on that code before in there to find and fix the issue and figure out how to fix that issue. And then ultimately we end up with giant dashboards of like, hey, here's all the stuff we should fix. Here's stuff that's never going to get fixed because it was found too late, or we have to totally disrupt feature development to do it. So what we want to encourage everybody to do is find those bugs during that early testing, during that coding phase, during that integration testing, when it's a lot cheaper and easier to fix. And the developer who is working on it is still working on it, can easily go back in and fix that bug the same time they would fix any other bug. So in our minds, security testing should just be thought of as regular software testing. And we give developers and engineers all sorts of tools to find errors and bugs throughout the software development lifecycle. So, when you think about when a team writes code, they know the syntax is wrong because it doesn't compile, right? The compiler catches that. When they merge code, they know there's a problem because it won't actually merge. They've got some conflict with another piece of code that's already in there, or in the build. And then when they run unit tests, they know the code is wrong because the unit test failed. And then again, same thing with integration tests. If they've introduced something that breaks that end to end, they find that. But when they introduce a security vulnerability, there is absolutely nothing that tells them, hey, you just introduced a security vulnerability. So we think there should be a way to discover and fix this tech debt earlier. So to talk to us about how we're going to do this, I'm actually going to let a developer talk instead of just me. So Austin, do you want to talk to us about this?
Sure. So how do we enable these developers to find these security vulnerabilities? Well, we know that the security testing in itself is not a new thing. Pen testers, security contractors, people, jobs like that have existed for a long time. But the security tools that are being put in the hands of the developers, that's a new concept. These tools get utilized directly into the development flow, which results in a lot less backtracking, a lot less tickets between teams. Since once those vulnerabilities are discovered during the development lifecycle, a lot of those issues can be easily fixed with just a little bit of code and a single commit before the code is even past the review stage. The AppSec to developer problem, the ratio problem that Lauren was mentioning before, is directly addressed by this, because now the people that are writing the code, introducing the vulnerabilities as they write it, now have the tools and the power to fix those bugs while they're working on the code itself. It takes a lot of the stress off the AppSec people themselves. Oh, you're muted, Lauren.
Thank you. How do we do this at StackHawk, and what specifically are we doing to help with this ratio problem? So what StackHawk provides is dynamic application security testing, or DAST. And so why did we choose DAST? It allows you, and why should you choose DAST, is it allows you to find what's discoverable and actually exploitable. We actually test applications from the outside in like a hacker would. So as opposed to something that maybe sits in the code base that could tell you these are vulnerable patterns, but doesn't tell you, hey, this is actually exploitable. What we find is actually exploitable, and therefore we have lower false positives. And we also, it's very easy to reproduce. So we can give you evidence, and we have a validate functionality that allows you to easily go in and repro the bug and validate it. We allow you to find security vulnerabilities from OWASP top 10, such as cross-site scripting and injection errors. We also have custom scripting that allows you to test for your own particular business logic, custom test cases, or any tenancy checks that you might want to do. DAST is also language independent. Because we're outside in, it doesn't matter to us what language you've developed your application in. We're just going to test those paths. So how do we compare to legacy DAST? Legacy DAST is traditionally known to have a high cost to implement. And with StackHawk, we have some simple configuration as code using YAML. And Legacy DAS also is known to only scan a small amount of the app and at a very slow pace. With StackHawk, we've worked to really optimize our scanner, and so we can rapidly scan HTML, REST, and SOAP APIs, as well as what we're talking about today and what Austin's going to demo for you, GraphQL. And we also allow you to do that with custom test data, with custom scan discovery. So we ensure that you are able to test every use case and every path. Typically with Legacy DAS, tests are run periodically, so maybe quarterly or weekly. We would love you to automate this in your CI/CD, run it with every build, every release, as often as you're running any other test or doing check-ins. And then also typically, again, as I mentioned before, those security vulnerabilities are found in production. So we want you to be able to find, triage, and fix issues before you ever release them to production. So it's a much lower risk profile for you and for your company. And you don't, again, have that disruption of throwing a bunch of security bugs back to the development team months after they've already been released to production and developers have moved on and are working on different things. So why is API security testing difficult? Again, I'm going to let Austin speak to this as a developer. So take it away, Austin.
All right, Lauren, well, let me tell you why it's so difficult. So as we know, applications themselves, frameworks, technology has been evolving at a very rapid rate, but the application security going alongside it has not been evolving at the same rate by any means. It's going at a much slower pace. So one of the main problems that we like to talk about in terms of application security testing, which our CSO is very passionate, Scott, he's very passionate about this and could talk about it a long time. So I hope I can do it justice here. But we typically have what we call the pants problem, which we are now festively reformatting into the Christmas sweater problem, clearly. So we are a company that sells ugly Christmas sweaters, and we have a lot of Christmas sweaters in our catalog. We have an application to be able to manage this, and we have a GraphQL, in this case, a GraphQL API that sits in front of our application. Here's a couple of our example queries or operations. We have a query for getting all the sweaters in our catalog, including name, color, size of each one. We have another query that will get us the information on a particular sweater given a specific sweater ID, and then a mutation that allows us to update a size given the ID of a sweater. So knowing that we have a lot of sweaters in our catalog, this is just some of the API to start working with it. Go to the next slide. So say now we want to test our query where we get the sweater by ID. That's a single query that our scanner can test. So traditionally, either we have two options. We can either give it some random data for the sweater ID that may or may not exist within the application. If it doesn't exist within the application, we'll just get probably a 404 kicked back, and none of the application's actual logic is going to get exercised. Another option we have is to take all of our sweater IDs and try them with this query, meaning we're doing the same query over and over again with each individual sweater ID we have. So we are actually exercising the logic in the application itself, but we're doing it a lot of times, hundreds, potentially thousands of times. This means that our scan can end up taking hours by running the same thing over and over again. That's not ideal, that's not efficient, and that's not how we like to do things here now. So how did we solve this problem? Go to the next slide, and we are introducing custom test data now for GraphQL APIs. So the tagline to this, you only need to wear one ugly holiday sweater, but you gotta make sure it's the perfect sweater. So in order to sufficiently test that get sweater by ID query that we were just talking about, we need an ID that actually exists within the context of the application. But like we just said, we only need one. We don't need the entire catalog here. So this is where the custom test data is going to come into play. Custom test data is going to allow you to provide a value or list of values that you want to use for given parameters within your app or within your API. So when the scanner comes across these, instead of coming up with garbage value that could be a tank top, which we're not a tank top shop, we're a Christmas sweater shop. We actually have things that exist within our application. We can even create our own testing resources that look a certain way and use those IDs in our query for that case if we want to have a specific resource we want to test with. We can give a list of random ones to move around with and try different ones on each scan. But long story short, it lets you designate exactly what you want to test with in terms of your API parameters. So we can go into a quick demo of that. I will show that off real quick. So Nicole, if you could relinquish the screen share to me.
Yeah, let me hand it over. There you go.
Here I am. Okay, so we are looking at what I have here is a GraphQL application, not exactly the Christmas sweater one, but it is still a GraphQL application nonetheless. And what we have here is one of our standard configurations we use for GraphQL. Most of this is pretty standard for any GraphQL application, but the main thing we want to look at here is these two sections. Make that a little bit bigger. So the main thing we have here is the custom variable section, and this gives you a list of objects. Each of these objects is going to have a field, which is essentially the parameter name. In this case, I'm using things like first name, last name, username, which if we go look at one of our other, or if we go look at the definition of our register query here, or register mutation, sorry, we have a username, password, last name, first name. So what I'd like to do here is when this register query or mutation happens with the scanner, I'd like to give it values for username, first name, and last name to use, specific values. So that's what I have set up here, where the field first name, last name, username is provided. And with each of these, I have a list of values as well. So for first name, when the scanner comes across this first name mutation, I want it to either use Ebenezer, Frosty, or Rudolph for the name. Same thing with last name, we're going to use Scrooge, the snowman, or reindeer when it comes across last name. Something else to add to this is we've also implemented the Faker library into this to where if you don't necessarily want to provide a specific values for these things, you can also generate more realistic values. Traditionally, we had a static string that Zap was generating for us that really was not relevant in most cases. But now using Faker, we can generate real looking phone numbers, emails, UUIDs, dates, anything like that. So if you don't need a specific value, but you still have format validation, you need to get fast, it's a great way to leverage Faker to do that. To do that with GraphQL, you simply provide it like a value, like I did the other last name and first names, but you give it the prefix of the $ Faker and then colon and the format you'd like. In this case, I'd like to use email. We have a list of all the formats that we implemented with Faker in our docs. I encourage you to check that out. There's a lot of good options there if you want to get real fancy with your data generation. So that's really all the extra configuration that's needed to start using this custom test data. We can simply run our Hawk scan command using the CLI to kick off the scan, and I'm just simply also pointing it to this particular configuration file. I do apologize. Oh, I can't make that bigger. Never mind. I don't apologize. I can get bigger. So as the scan is starting out now, it's going to start spidering and crawling our GraphQL application. Once it does that, it's going to see all the operations that are provided within the GraphQL application, which we can just see got spit out here. The main thing we want to look at here is the register mutation, which I can show off in a better formatted sense in just a moment, but we can see here that it did find this mutation for register that took the username, password, first name, last name. And we can see down here in the variables, we actually use some of these things. So the Faker value generated an email, Sebastian Konopelski@hotmail.com. Poor guy's still on Hotmail. So that's an actual realistic looking email there instead of just general cacaw, what have you, like this. This is what we used to generate, is just cacaw. And now you can also see for first name, we got Ebenezer out of there and we pulled the snowman. So those are randomized. So we got the first one and then the second one from the last names. But that data is more realistic looking is the main thing. And if we have those resources that we want to test with, it will find those now. If we go look at on the platform what this looks like. Oop, I got logged out. So looking at this on the platform, we can go into our findings. We can find that a cross-domain misconfiguration was discovered on this register mutation. And then same thing we just saw there. Same thing we just saw there. We used the Sebastian Konopelski at Hotmail for the username. That was generated by Faker, and for our first and last name, it pulled it from the values or from the specific list of values that we provided there. So by doing this, what happens is instead of generic values that'll kick back 404s or resources not found, you're actually going to get into your code and the scanner will be able to exercise it with real data and be able to touch more corners of your application, try to fully cover it. Also, something else worth mentioning, new with the custom test data for GraphQL on GraphQL scans, we now have this operations tab, which gives you a full summary of all the operations that got ran against your application. It's a good way to see a view of all your GraphQL that got hit on that scan. Lets you know if you're missing something or anything along those lines. But as we can see, register was hit. We found it in the finding, and our custom values were injected. So that is a general overview of the demo there, and I will go ahead and relinquish the screen share back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. We'll jump back in. So now, I mean, this leeways us into our open Q&A. I know this was a quick session. We were just, like we said in the beginning, trying to get down to the good stuff, let people ask questions and be on your way. So if there's anything that came up during that time, any questions you guys have, please drop them in the Q&A or chat in Zoom, and we'll run through those quickly. I'd also say, I mean, have you guys, well, we're kind of waiting to see if anybody has any questions. Is there anything that you guys have come across up to this point that have been, you know, questions that have been common or anything that might be on people's minds? Like I'm trying. Oh,
yeah. Well, I know we released this custom test data capability for REST APIs a couple months ago as part of our deeper security testing. That was when we also released our custom scan discovery and custom test groups capability. So we're really excited to now offer this for GraphQL. I know we have a lot of customers that use GraphQL and we're asking about this when we release it for REST. And it was also adding that operations tab was another big customer ask from our GraphQL users. So we're very excited to have done this quick follow-up and make this available for GraphQL users. Common questions we've had about the custom test data. I haven't had a bunch of questions on it yet. So happy to see what we get here today. But I think we've got some good documentation linked there. And if there are questions after this webinar, we're always happy to answer them. Either we've got a little chat in the application, or you can email support@stackhawk.com as well.
absolutely. Yeah. We've got one question, one really good one so far. Can you specify this test data per query or mutation?
No, right now it's not on a permutation or query. It's simply just done by parameter name. So yeah, if you do have two separate queries with the same parameter name in it, they'll both pull from the same list of values you use. That being said, when they are injected separately, they do pull from the value pull from the value list individually. Meaning if you have a list of values there, the two separate queries could get different values.
Sorry, I was switching screens to answer a question.
Yeah, no problem. And I can speak to the pricing question. So yeah, and I think Nicole was going to bring up the website if people are interested, but we do have 3 tiers. So we have a free, a pro, and enterprise. Pricing varies per tier, but generally we price based on code contributors. So however many developers you have working on the code that you're testing. And we do have a 14-day enterprise trial. So this functionality is available in our pro tier, but if you would like to try it out, you can try that out in our free trial and let us know what you think. You can just go to the website and sign up, StackHawk.com. Any more questions? Everybody's just anxious to get to their holidays.
I know.
Also, highly recommend. We had, like I said, that larger release around all the deeper API security testing functionality. If you have more questions, about custom scan discovery or custom test scripts, definitely go check out that webinar. There's a demo of all of that functionality as well as the custom test data for REST APIs. Oh, one more question for you, Austin. How many mutation options can I specify for a parameter?
How many mutation options can I specify for a parameter? If I understand the question correctly, you're asking how many potential values I can give for a parameter to pull from, and that list is limitless. We don't have a limit on that. You could put 1,000 potential values in there. You can put your entire catalog, and one will be randomly chosen on each scan if you wanted to. We currently don't have any restrictions on that. Might need to put some if you guys get too crazy with it, though.
Nice.
Don't abuse your powers.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions for the dream team on deeper GraphQL testing? I will say, just to kind of wrap things up, you will be hearing from us as always. We will be in communication after this, so you can expect the recording as well as some resources to follow up if you want to learn more. But you will absolutely receive the recording to this webinar right after this session today. And yeah, our team will be in touch if you have any other questions, that come up afterwards. But you do have these two available right now. So I think we got,
Just a thank you. You're welcome. Thank you all for attending.
That's even better.
Otherwise, we just talk to ourselves.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Well, thank you guys so much for attending right before the holidays. We hope everybody has a safe trip if you're going anywhere like Lauren, or if you're staying nearby. We just hope that you enjoy the long weekend and join us for another session in the new year. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lauren and Austin. That was a great session.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.